was a long trip. So let's kind of start at the beginning. So last time we spoke, you had talked leading into the first weekend of this road trip, of course. You had said that the Cats, in this Lewis game in particular, needed to come out and prove that they could execute. Well, got the win, so mission accomplished?
Yeah, it was our first game outside since we are spoiled by the world's largest wooden dome. And you could definitely tell that we were really tight because of that, because it was cold and it was sleeting and it was all things we should be used to living in the UP, but we don't actually really ever play outside. So that was kind of a shock. It took us a while to pick up pace. It took us a while to be able to score, but yes, ultimately we ended up winning by a comfortable margin. I think we could have performed a lot better in that game. But ultimately, with how the rest of the spring break trip went, I'm really happy with those first two games because they were both wins. So, but that first game against Lewis, we had Caitlin Bridger scored a lot more goals than normal, which was cool, and we had some people step up over spring break that were injured last year, but were big playmakers 2 years ago. So it's been really cool to see those. Caitlin Bridger and Kate Mongold both grow back kind of into their previous roles and even start to improve. But Lewis and then the Quincy game both kind of started our scoring problems that we faced later in the week. So it was very interesting that even though those two games led to a win, it did show the problems that would lead to the way the rest of the week went. So, yeah.
You had talked about how you knew Lewis was going to be a quality team to go against, that it was going to be a good beginning test for you guys on the road. Like you said, you got past that one and then win with another comfortable margin at Quincy. Moving on to Maryville, you knew the challenge that you guys were up against, and offensively, I mean, they came out and showed out. And what do you do when a team is just clicking on all cylinders like that?
I mean, you can't win a lacrosse game if they score 21 goals on you. But ultimately, we did go 0 of 10 on free position shots, and we shot about 25% overall. And we had more shots than them by 6, I think. So it was a closer battle than the score would show, but it also was such a great thing to see because it really showed our offensive problems, which is just we have a lot of spacing issues. So all of these shots we were taking just aren't open, and so many of them weren't on cage. I mean, if you're scoring 11 of 36 and 0 free position shots, which are basically basketball free throws, that's not good. That's not how you're going to win lacrosse games, and it's also just not the standard that we've had for shooting or the percentages that we've had for shooting for the rest of the year. So I'm hopeful, and I was hopeful after that game that we'd be able to immediately improve and have better stats in the next game. And ultimately, Maryville's a really good team. They had some quickness we didn't have an answer for. They currently have the leading scorer in all D2 of points per game. She's a fifth-year senior who transferred with their coach when the coach took the Maryville job. I mean, she's very good. And we didn't really have an answer for her. But ultimately, I was disappointed in our ability to finish in that game because it should have been a much tighter margin based on sheer number of shots we took. We also had the problem where Maddie Bast, one of our leading scorers, our second leading scorer last year, scored no goals in that game or the next game, despite shooting about 9 or 10 shots. So when one of your big guns isn't able to actually find the back of the net, even though she had multiple free position shots, and when Minnie Biddle, our other leading scorer, also is not able to find the back of the net like she usually is, she's not getting the touches, you have to start relying on other people. And Kate Mongold had a breakout game in that Maryville game, but 6 goals by one kid isn't enough to overcome that 10-goal margin. So it was just a really frustrating game, then followed by another really frustrating game. So
how do you coach up that aspect of the free position shots? Like your mindset as a player going into those, I don't know, talk about, I guess, the strategy of those, and are you kind of letting each of them kind of wing it as they go out there as far as their placement, different types of things? I'm very curious, not knowing too much about it myself.
There's a couple there's a lot of different strategies to how you should handle free position shots. At the Division I level, you'll see some people that just like stand, wind up, and rip it from the line, and you're 8 meters because it's an 8-meter arc from the goal. And people at that level have that that amount of skill to place the ball. We have about 2 kids on our team that I would trust to do that. And even though I would trust them, I still wouldn't want them to do that because their shot percentage is so much lower from that distance that they're going to end up either missing the goal or hitting the goalie. So the best thing to do is to be able to be quick off the line because it's a whistle reaction. It's from a ref's dropped hand and a whistle, and to be able to beat the 2 defenders that are set up about 4 meters from either side of you that are running in at you, beating them to goal so you can shoot before they hit you. And the best thing to do is just shoot in between your shoulders within 2 steps and shoot at the goalie's hips because that's the hardest part to save because you have a stick. So that's what we tell them to do. Being able to do that under pressure when you're tired and all these different things, like it's really hard. It is. And I completely understand that. And we generally have like an okay percentage of free position shots made. I've never seen what happened in those 2 games. Like we ended up in the Rockhurst and Maryville game going 3 of 24, I think, or 23, which that's not good. So that's something we're working on this week. But if we're going to be able to draw fouls, which is an important part of lacrosse because so much scoring happens at the free position line, we need to be able to score at least 50% or even 40%. Yeah.
So picking up on a couple of things here, like you'd said, against Maryville, they just had some quickness. You felt like the Cats couldn't really answer. And, it's harder to obviously execute and pull things off like that when you're tired. So just kind of reading into that a little bit, obviously this is a really long trip, both in terms of distance and in length, time-wise. Do you feel like that at all factored in, like by the end, say, of the end of the Rockers game? Do you feel like the Cats still had much left to give there?
Absolutely. It's hard to be on the road for that long. We had a 3-day gap between the Quincy game and the Maryville game, and I was hopeful that would help with recovery, but the lack of being able to like have good practice time, because we had 2 practices, but one of them was only about an hour, and it's not the same as being as your home field. There's not the same comfort level. We weren't able to do things to the same caliber of prep time, that sort of thing. We also had some injuries in the Quincy game that people were playing through. So yes, like part of it is just exhaustion because our starting group plays most of the game, and lacrosse is a taxing, long sport, especially when you have as many draws as happened in both of those games. That they were dragging, but it's still, the execution part was disappointing and is something we can learn from, because even though we were tired and it was the end of a 9-day road trip, I would be okay if we lost both of those games, but the way we lost it because of not being able to execute shots is really hard. And it's a lot of just offensive spacing issues of the more tired you get, the closer you get together because it takes more work to spread out. And then when you move within our offense, there's just no space, so all your shots are bad. So that was frustrating. And Rockhurst does run a very clever zone that we had a lot of issues with last year too. So ideally that's a game you want more than a night of prep for. And they weren't someone that was originally on our schedule. There's some factors there, but I don't want to give us too many excuses. Like, we do need to actively grow from this and be able to put the ball in the net.
One other thing that I wanted to ask you about that kind of came up there was, like you said, it's tough to win games when you don't get the scoring production from your usual sources. But how about Kate Mongol this weekend, who just kind of really popped off? And like you said, so what does that do to have a player like that with a lot of experience who can step up and kind of fill in those shoes and score those goals when you have to look elsewhere?
It's really important to have about 4 people that can score and create a productive offense at any given time, and we kind of have that in Kate, Caitlin, Minnie, and Maddie. And Kate just really has stepped up. Last year, Kate dislocated her elbow and was out for a very significant period of the season, and that was really hard for her. And for us, because she's such a big part of the the energy and intensity of our team. She's a very intense human. She cuts hard, she drives hard, she shoots hard. And this is the first year we've moved her now after this weekend entirely to the attacking side. So she never has to come out of the game. And that way she can focus all of her energy and intensity on these hard cuts, hard drives. And if you put her in the right place in the offense, you know that she can do her one move really, really well. And it's awesome because it worked 6 times in a row against Maryville. And then it worked like 4 times in a row against Rockhurst. And it's such a cool tool to have because she's like, that intensity is very unique and you don't see it in players very much. Yeah.
All that aside, back in the Dome, back to being spoiled up
Yes.
here in the UP. Friday, Concordia St. Paul. What are you looking forward towards in that matchup?
Concordia St. Paul, if you were to ask our team who their rival is, they would say Concordia St. Paul because we have so many Minnesotans. They've played against these kids their entire life. A lot of them played for rival club teams. Concordia St. Paul is more of the private school kids. Our team is more of the public school kids. You have that rivalry. They went to the private school that's in the city. We're the public school that's in the woods. There's this natural rivalry there. And over the past couple years, we've gone from being very much the little brother to more of an even battle. And that's what's been fun, especially last year because we split. We won when we were at their house and then they won here, that we really want to be able to defend the Dome this year. And we've been playing better in the Dome than we have in the past, which is really exciting. And Concordia has a really young team this year, but they're really talented. Minnesota kids that want to stay home have a lot of talent. So I think it'll be a really fun matchup, but it's definitely something where we need to execute better than we did in our previous 2 games, but I am hopeful. I have a week of prep time, and this is the team that they are all the most familiar with because they played with them for so long that it'll be exciting. And there's never any need to like rev up the rivalry. They do it themselves, so they really care about this game.
Coach, one thing I'd be curious about is, like you said, we're playing better in the Dome than we have in the past. And part of playing in the Dome is the turf monster in there is pretty notorious, I've come to understand in the last couple of years. So, excuse me, so in a sport like lacrosse where you have all this cutting and planting and running back and forth and going up and down both ways, how do you learn to adapt to your surface? And like, what do you, I mean, from like an equipment standpoint, I know like some of our football guys don't even bother with cleats. Like, has your squad kind of found different ways to adapt to it like that?
For sure. We fall a lot. But on top of that, it really helps that we have such a long preseason because we do have the entire fall that you get used to it. You have to just cut and break your feet down in a different way than you do on all other surfaces. And we have some kids that use turf shoes, but we then, when you go play outside, it's mostly like the long turf, so you need both shoes. But the Dome is such a unique home field advantage because it's so slick and so bouncy and so hard that in lacrosse, you can change the way you shoot based on that, and also the ball's on the ground a lot, so it'll roll fast in a way that it doesn't on any other field. And our team knows how to predict where that movement's going, and you'll see other teams like stop short where they think the ball's going to go, and then our team just sprints past them because we know how the turf rolls, and it's very interesting to watch. We still fall a lot, but we fall a lot less than other teams because when you're not used to like planting and cutting on that, it's really hard to break your feet down in a way that you normally would. So at least we're more used to it, and we definitely have been far better this year on it than we ever have been, which is cool. The turf monster, it's great.